studio. It's our pleasure to welcome now Mississippi Congressman Michael Guest. He represents the 3rd District in the Magnolia State. Hey, Congressman, how are you this morning, sir?
Good morning, Gerard. Doing well. Thank you for having me on.
You bet. So it looks like you guys are having a fairly busy December here.
We are. We're trying to kind of clear the decks before President Trump is sworn in January. And so we're really extending programs that will be expiring between now and the end of the year. With the focus is that we want, when President Trump is sworn in January, he be able to leave his fingerprints on the things that we're doing. And so we're going to be passing a continuing resolution. And though I normally vote against continuing resolutions, in this case, to allow us to have a Republican-controlled Senate, Republican-controlled House, and a Republican in the White House, is going to allow us as conservatives to really be able to drive our spending priorities, the riders that we attach to those. We're also going to be doing a farm bill extension, and so when we pass a new farm bill next Congress, that will be written by Republicans in the House and Senate. We won't have to negotiate with a Democrat-controlled Senate when we're writing that. Also dealing with the National Defense Authorization Act, WRDA, and there'll have to be at least some money for disaster supplemental based on the storms that we saw at the end of hurricane season that hit Florida and left much of the flooding there in Tennessee, North Carolina, and parts of Georgia. So you're exactly right. We've got several major pieces of legislation that will have to extend into next Congress, again, with the intent that Republicans will control both chambers. President Trump will be sworn in, and the final draft of those bills will look much different than if we were trying to pass those bills today with Joe Biden in the White House and Chuck Schumer controlling the United States Senate.
So, Congressman, what will be the expiration date of that CR? That will not take us through the entire fiscal year 25, will it?
It will not, Gerard. That has not been released. We're hearing that they're batting around somewhere between mid to late March, maybe early April. And
okay.
So I would expect that to be roughly a 3-month extension. Again, that allows us as Republicans to work this out among ourselves and not be forced to negotiate with the White House, with Joe Biden sitting there, and with Chuck Schumer in the Senate. So I think that as conservatives, we are going to get much better legislation, whether it be the Farm Bill or the appropriations bills, once we control all levers of power here in Washington, D.C.
So let's review that for a minute just to update our audience. The balance of power is incredibly tight, with Republicans having 220 seats, Democrats 215. That's a margin of 5. But at some point early on, when the new Congress is seated, we got 3 seats that will be vacated, right? Putting the number at 217 to 215.
You're exactly right. And so Matt Gaetz, who won re-election in the state of Florida, has chosen not to be seated with the new Congress on January the 3rd. That seat has been declared vacant by the Florida Secretary of State. They have already set the qualifying dates as well as the primary and general election, and so that seat will be vacant until April the 1st. That is the general election for that seat.
Okay.
And then we'll have 2 seats that will be vacant once President Trump is sworn in. One out of the state of Florida with Mike Waltz, who will be going to work with the administration, and the other out of the state of New York with Elise Stefanik, who has been tapped to be the ambassador to the UN. And so you're exactly right. On January 20th, we will effectively have a 2-seat majority. And so then that means if any Republican were to vote with the Democrat opposition, it would result in a tie vote, meaning that legislation would fail. And so it's going to be very important that we as Republicans in both the House and Senate, that we are united behind President Trump's agenda, that we are not fighting amongst ourselves, and that we're focused on getting legislation passed because it is going to require us to be working in a unanimous fashion, particularly in the House, for us to be able to get legislation across the finish line to the Senate and ultimately to the president's desk for his signature.
A lot of discussion about putting these reconciliation packages. You guys don't have this problem in the House, but as you well know, in the Senate, if you're going to pass legislation with a simple majority, and over there Republicans have the lead 53 to 47, but to get legislation through over there, you got to avoid the filibuster. You can do that with legislation that meets the requirements to pass with a simple majority through reconciliation. But there's a lot of debate, is there not, Congressman, about, okay, you generally have 3 reconciliation bills a year that can be passed, I think, under the rules, and how do you sequence those? There's some discussion about that. Is immigration, energy, tax policy are kind of the 3 that are being discussed. What do you think?
Yeah, and that's right. And what you get is you get one chance at reconciliation per fiscal year.
Okay.
So you could do one for this year, which would expire October 30th, 2025. Then you could do one for the next appropriations year, and so we would have the opportunity to do a total 3 during next term of Congress, but we could do 2 next year.
Okay.
And of course, the thing that begins that as we start talking about the budget reconciliation process, which allows us to get around the filibuster in the Senate. The first thing we've got to do is we have to pass a budget resolution, and so the House and the Senate must come together to pass a budget resolution. And that's not something that Congress traditionally does. The only time that you will see Congress pass a budget resolution is when you do have a scenario to where one party controls the House, the Senate, and the White House. And so that will be something that I believe that we as Congress, both House and Senate, will begin working on once we are sworn in on January the 3rd. That process is going to take a period of time in the Senate. It is much quicker here in the House. And what that does, as we set forth that budget resolution, it not only talks about the total amount of money taken in by the government, the spending, the debt, but it also has specific language that are instructions as part of that budget resolution that deal with the reconciliation process.
Okay.
So it may order certain committees. So if one of the, if we're going to use one of the budget reconciliation processes to address the southwest border, it would order the Homeland Security Committee to draft proposed language and would also give that committee the ability to spend up to a certain amount of money to accomplish that.
Okay.
And so you're right. So so we're looking at most likely being 2 budget reconciliations that Congress will attempt to take on in 2025. The first, we believe, will be directed toward border security, securing the border. It may also have some changes to immigration policy. And then the second budget reconciliation process, which will occur a little bit later in 2025, would be the extension of the Trump tax cuts and any other tax-related issues that the president would seek to move forward. We know that in his campaign, he made a lot of campaign promises about things such as not including tax on tips, not including tax on overtime, not wanting to tax people's Social Security benefits. And so that is going to be a much more in-depth conversation as to which tax policies the president wants to be included in the reconciliation, and then how we're going to pay for that. And so I do expect that will probably come sometime in the second half of 2025, but I think that the border security component of that will come very early in President Trump's administration.
Well, Senator Toon has said that he wants to move quickly on border and energy policy in reconciliation packages. I believe he said separate packages, and then take up tax legislation later in the year. because he fears that's going to be a much more involved debate. But I saw an interview with your colleague, Congressman Jason Smith, heads Ways and Means, chairman of Ways and Means in the House, this morning, saying that we really should take up tax deliberation as part of the initial package that include that in the immigration package as well in that policy. We got a break right now. If you can hang with us, I'll get you to respond to that on the other side.
Would love to.
Yeah, Congressman Michael Guest is our guest. We're in the Element Wealth studio coming. We've got Congressman Michael Guest on the line with us. So before we went to break there, Congressman, just talking about what seems to be a difference of opinion on how to prioritize the president's legislative agenda with respect to these reconciliation packages.
Yeah, and you had mentioned Jason Smith, chairman of Ways and Means, who would be responsible for the tax extenders from the as we seek to extend the Trump tax cuts. Jason's thought process is that he would like to see the budget reconciliation process to move simultaneously so that we would address border, energy, and taxes all in a single piece of legislation.
Yeah.
We know that the Senate's going to be extremely busy, not only dealing with reconciliation, but also the Trump appointees, the cabinet appointees, appointees to the federal bench, appointees to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And so I think Jason's thought process is that he wants to make sure that the tax provisions don't get lost in the fact that somehow the Senate runs out of time to accomplish everything that's going to be before them. The House can, I believe, very easily move to reconciliation processes because we don't have some of the same structure rules that they have in the Senate.
Okay.
And it is extremely important that we renew those tax cuts.
Yes.
If those tax cuts are not renewed by the end of next year, it is going to require the taxes paid by every American, those that pay taxes, they are going to see some sort of tax increase. And so if we're going to make sure that we're not taxing Americans more, then Congress has to get this done. And I believe that we will. And I believe President Trump not only wants to extend the previous tax cuts, but I believe that he wants to find some additional tax cuts to help American businesses, to help American innovation, and to see that we remain globally competitive in both a business environment and then on the tax rates that we see on our American citizens. I think Americans now pay too much in taxes, so anything that we can do as a legislative body to bring those costs down, I think, are extremely important.
Yeah, and that's what essentially what Congressman Jason Smith was saying this morning. So he expressed some concerns, and I guess at some point leadership in the respective chambers will try to sort that out and come up with an agenda they feel like can get through. But I share Jason's concerns that we kind of get further on in the year and we take this massive legislation up. You know, it's going to be a big debate. The Democrats are going to really squawk about it. Of course, they don't have the power you guys do, but you're going to be in a situation where you can't lose anybody, essentially, on your side in the House.
Yeah. Well, if we're able to do the border security very early, particularly when we're down those three members, and then after special election, we do expect those seats to remain in Republican control. That would give us a little bit more breathing room on our side to be able to make sure that we're able to get these bills across the finish line. I believe that much of that discussion will be decided when President Trump is sworn into office, that he and his team will ultimately make the decision as to whether or not we break this into two reconciliation packages or if we move forward with one larger reconciliation process. And so we're going to give great deference to the president to accomplish his legislative priorities. And I believe that those discussions are ongoing, and we will probably have an answer when Congress reconvenes on January the 3rd as to whether we're going to try to do one big, massive reconciliation bill at the beginning of the year or whether we're going to break it into two smaller packages. And look, I see the pros and cons of both. And so I'm not advocating for one or the other.
Okay.
We've got to get both of them done. whether we do them simultaneously or whether we break them and try to move them individually. I think that is a discussion for House and Senate leadership and the president's team for them ultimately to make that decision.
Okay. Before we go, got a couple of minutes left. What do you think about Mr. Trump's appointments? Do you foresee any problems over there in the Senate?
You know, it seems like that his appointments are being much more well received. There was some question as to whether or not Secretary of Defense, whether Pete was going to run into any major obstacles. It seemed like some of the resistance from Republican members has softened, and it does look that he is going to stay the course. We had been hearing, I guess, maybe just late last week that maybe he might pull out and that DeSantis might be appointed to fill that position. But the information that I'm getting is I think he is getting a much warmer reception from Senate Republicans. They're going to have people like Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., where there are going to be questions asked. But, you know, if I was right now looking at that, the lineup and who President Trump has proposed, I think I see a very real path for all of his nominees to make it through the confirmation process and be serving in his administration early next year.
That sounds good. Congressman, always good to talk to you, sir. We appreciate the update. We'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks, Gerard. Have a great day. Good talking to you as well.
Yeah, man. Folks, it's time for a break. Fox News Super Talk.